and welcome to True Potential's brand new episode of the Do More With Your Money podcast. Today we are going to be talking about how to optimise your auto-enrolment workplace pension. And today I am joined by John, who is Head of Monitoring Control. We've got Samantha, who is the TP Investor Team Leader, and Fiona, who is the Auto-Enrolment Team Leader. So we've got some perfect people for the job in today to speak about the topic. What we're going to be covering is basically kind of what auto-enrolment pension is, how to optimise it, how to utilise it to the best of your ability going through your life as an investor, and kind of really picking out some top tips and kind of pointers and how you can manage that best moving forward. So I think kind of break the bank with this one. First things first, can Fiona, you kind of give us a little bit more information on what is auto-enrolment?
Yeah, of course, thanks Hayley. So auto-enrolment was brought in by the government as a mandatory scheme. So anyone who has a business and has at least one employee must offer an auto-enrolment pension scheme. It kind of does exactly what it says on the tin. For the employees themselves, they are automatically enrolled by the employer. So they would look at assessing their workers and putting them into a pension policy to encourage and look at helping people invest for their future and looking sort of towards their retirement without kind of employees themselves having to think about it. It's done automatically by the employers, and it kind of gets the ball rolling looking at saving for retirement.
Yeah. I think kind of looking at why it's important then and kind of why it was introduced. So what is the age that you're automatically enrolled?
So you're automatically enrolled if you are 22 years old, up to 74, which is the top end of the scale at the moment. It also looks at kind of earnings in that as well, but that is the kind of the age bracket that we look at for an auto-enrolment eligibility criteria.
Yeah, fab. I think it's a really key point to auto-enrolment that it does start at the age of 22, because I think from me, my own personal circumstances, kind of speaking with clients or kind of day in, day out, it's not something at 22 that's really at the top of people's priorities. John, I think you've done kind of advice in the past and things like that. I don't know, do you have the same kind of view on that being as young as 22, it's maybe not the top of their priorities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, typical 22-year-old very early in their working lives, perhaps they've been working for a few years, they might have gone to university and just come straight into the workforce. Tends not to be high on the list of priorities when you think about state pension age being late 60s. There's this sort of 40-plus year gap between people who are starting out in work and when they're eventually going to need to retire. I think the point that we've got to, certainly as a nation, is the state pension more so is very unlikely to be able to cover everything you need it to when you come to retire. So the government recognised that there was this gap, a savings gap, if you will, where people were going to arrive at retirement in the future and they weren't going to have enough money to cover what they needed. So that's going to put pressure on government, pressure on the welfare system. So it's designed essentially to encourage people to put some money away for their own retirement, and rather than waiting for them to take action themselves, it's forcing them to do it by enrolling them into this type of scheme.
Absolutely. I think when we think of pension contributions, I think my mind automatically goes to large sums of money. I think everyone knows kind of you do need a certain amount of funds to be able to retire comfortably when you get older. So I think when you look at contributions, you think, God, how much am I going to have to put in to be able to save to hit a 400 grand pot for when I eventually do retire. But within auto-enrolment, we've got minimum contributions, so it kind of sets a standard across the board. If you want to put in more, you can do. But Fiona, can you just go into a little bit about the minimum standards that we've got and the minimum contribution amounts for both the employee and the employer?
Yeah, absolutely. So the minimum contribution amount between employee and employer is 8% of qualifying earnings, and that's a split which is 5% employee and 3% employer. So it looks like small numbers, but when you think you're putting that away kind of each month straight out of your payroll, It really does build up over time. And it's, that is the minimum. There is obviously scope to look at more than that. But it's a very good kind of baseline to start with to set up the pensions and look at the kind of future retirement funds.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've just mentioned there, it's straight from the payroll, so there is some tax relief benefits by being enrolled within an auto-enrolment scheme. John, what are the reliefs for clients? What can they get, and kind of what benefits do they get from opting into a pension like this?
Yeah, of course. So people need to be encouraged to save and encouraged to increase their pension contributions where we can. And one of the ways that the government incentivises people to put money into their pension is to provide what's called tax relief.
Yeah.
Now, if I'm paid by my employer and I earn, say, £100, if I'm a basic rate taxpayer, I'll lose £20 of that to income tax. So I'm left with 80 in my pocket. Essentially, if you decide to put that £80 into a pension scheme, whether it's through auto-enrolment or whether it's into a private pension, you effectively get your basic rate tax back automatically. So that £80 would become £100 again. For those who are sitting in higher earning positions and you're potentially paying higher rate tax, you can also get a tax credit from HMRC as well. You can get your higher rate tax back as well from putting money into your pension. So it's that sort of tax incentive. It's designed to encourage people to save rather than discourage it. You get your tax back effectively.
Yeah, it's a very tax efficient way to save there, isn't it? So we've kind of covered the benefits of tax relief now. One of the, I think, main trivial points again with auto-enrolment is that the client or the employee does have the option to opt in or opt out of it. So you've got kind of a couple of different scenarios where a client can be, say, auto-enrolled in and they can opt out of it, or also those who are not automatically enrolled, they can opt in. Fiona, can you just give us the metrics behind that and how that works in practice?
Yeah, so any eligible employee who is auto-enrolled, once they are, or from the date they are enrolled into that scheme, they have a 30-day period in which they can opt out.
Yeah.
They can do that by kind of contacting the pension provider directly and notifying them any contributions they may have paid within the payroll in that 30-day period is eligible to be refunded back to them. So they have that 30 days to kind of think, assess whether it is right for them. Do they want to be involved or not? That's absolutely fine. So they've got that 30-day period. Similarly, anyone who may not fit the criteria, so anyone, for example, who may be employed at 18, 19, 20, they don't drop into the 22 to 74, they have the right as well to contact their employer and opt in. So, it's not just because they're not in that bracket that they can't be in the auto-enrolment pension scheme. They just have to opt in. And like I say, the employer then is obliged to pay the contributions as they would if they were already 22 and sort of fit the auto-enrolment criteria. Yeah. So yeah, there is a couple of options, and once you opt out, it's not the be-all and end-all. If you find that you have a reassessment, you have a rethink, a few months down the line, again, same scenario, you can contact the employer and get put back into the scheme as well. So it's not a be-all and end-all. If you do opt out, you can still opt back in.
Yeah. I think that's quite a good way to look at it. So I think people's circumstances change even kind of month to month with regards to how much they can afford to save. You've got the cost of living these days and things like that. And I think people look at it and say, well, I can't afford to have £50 deducted from my wage at this point. But it is something that's always available and you can kind of look back on over the months. You've mentioned there that you can reassess and kind of go back in and have a look at it. But what we also have with an auto-enrolment is that re-enrolment every 3 years. So if you're with an employer or have been with them for a longer period of time, they always have to re-enroll their staff. So anyone who's opted out, a big reassessment of the full scheme automatically gets put back in. You do again at that point have the option to opt out if you want to, but it is there to kind of trigger it back into people's memory and kind of rethink about what their life circumstances are, what they want to gain out of their savings and things. And 3 years is such a long period of time for someone, isn't it? It's not like kind of going from June to July. 3 years, a lot of things could have changed, which is what that was really introduced for, to try and re-establish that connection back with saving. And really it is to completely tackle that savings gap, because as John mentioned, the state pension's not going to be suitable to cover everyone's income to the level that they need by the time they come to retirement. Okay, moving on to how to assess your pension. So if we're looking at someone who's automatically enrolled, they've got a pension with it could be any provider with True Potential, just as an example, how to understand what you're doing with that. So what contributions you're putting in, what contributions your employer's putting in, what kind of growth and things you've got on your investment. You get what is called a pension statement. Sam, how would a client have a look on to, say, True Potential's app and client site to understand their pension statement from their workplace pension?
So we have quite a lot of documents. When you're a client with True Potential, we have quite a few documents that are uploaded to your client site, and the pension statement is one of them. It's uploaded to your client site about 12 months after you've actually started contributing. So it obviously gives you a year's kind of overview of how much you've contributed, how much your employer's contributed. The three kind of main points that we have on our statements is how much you currently have in the policy, how much you could have in the policy at the intended retirement age. And then it has got a section right down the bottom where it goes over what you could add into the account to make sure that you're getting the best out of it for when you are coming up to your retirement. And obviously with auto-enrolment, because they are non-advised schemes, any kind of more advice that you're wanting on that, the best person to kind of refer to is the Money Helper team.
Yeah, perfect. So within the pension statement, you said what you could have. So that's basically like goal setting. We've got a really useful tool within the client site and app for those who haven't used it before, where you can go on and actually set a goal. And it does give you an overview as to if you were to save to X amount of pounds, this is how much you would be intended to come out with at retirement age. So it really gives you a clear understanding of kind of your planning and projection of what you want out of investing. That's all available on the client site and app. If you did want to go in and have a look, you can edit that and change it to kind of see and suit you the best way possible. I think if we then go to the key metrics then, so contribution levels, balances, projected retirement income. Jonna, I'll come over to you for this one. How can clients kind of review that? What's the best way to do this for an auto-enrolment client?
Yeah, absolutely. So with most pension statements, you'll be given a figure of what you've got in your pension. Now, by itself, that doesn't necessarily mean a lot. You know, if I've got £20,000 in a pension, you know, for a lot of people, that'll be maybe a year's worth of income.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to be arriving at retirement with just 20,000 because I'm not going to have a very long or enjoyable retirement. So you can take that figure of what you've got in your pension, and usually a pension statement will project it up to say, well, this is what it might be worth if you're retiring at 65, for example, and this is the level of income per year that you would potentially be able to get. I think that's where your goal setting comes in, because
absolutely,
if you identify, well, ideally when I retire, I want to be able to live on, say, £20,000 a year, £25,000 a year, the goal setting can kind of work backwards to say, well, in order to provide that level of income, this is roughly how much your pension needs to be worth. This is how much your pension's worth today, and therefore this is how much you would realistically need to be contributing each month to get to where you need to be. And that's how you can start to work out what's affordable for you now, how much you can put away, and how much your pension might grow by with the investment side of it to get to that sort of end retirement goal. And like we said, it's going to be adjusted along the way. You'll get an annual statement, or you might be logging into your app every month or whatever it might be. Naturally, the investment performance is going to be different year to year, and your circumstances can change as well, which might allow you to put more money in from time to time. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the kind of one bit of advice to come out of that one is if you did want to have a look into that a little bit further, please log on. You can also speak to the team if needs be, just to give you a little bit more information on how to read and analyse the statements that come in. Okay, so if we have a look now into the employer contribution matching, so we have firms who use True Potential as their workplace pension solution. It is sometimes seen as a benefit now with regards to having a workplace pension within the company. Sam, can you just speak to me a little bit about how an employer would kind of match someone's contributions, how that would work for the employee and what it looks like for them?
Yeah, of course. So obviously, as Fiona went over earlier, the employers are obligated to contribute at the minimum of the 3% into your pension policies. But you can, obviously, depending on your own circumstances, you can actually increase your own contributions. With you increasing your own contributions, you can then approach your employer and then ask them to match the same percentage that you are putting into the account. Obviously, employers may only match up to a certain percentage, but you can then go and ask that question.
Yeah, I think it's something that I've seen, especially over the last couple of years. It's actually people advertise it as a benefit. One of the benefits of working at this business is the fact that if you were to put 5% in, the employer also matches it, or 6% the employer matches it. And I know we're talking kind of really small percentages, say 1 or 2%, but that difference over an elongated period of time can make a huge difference. If we look at the fees then, the management of the fees and the impact on the pension growth, John, if we come over to you for that, how does that impact a client?
Yeah, so the idea of the pension is that you pay money into it, and with an auto-enrolment scheme, it would tend to be invested in things like stocks and shares or bonds or whatever it might be, depending on how the pension's set up. And ideally, you want those investments to grow over time, right?
Of course.
Now, for someone in the middle of the risk range, you know, a pension might grow by 3% a year, 4% a year, 5% a year, whatever it is on average. Of course, for having your pension invested on a platform or with a provider, usually the provider will have some form of cost for managing your pension scheme. Equally, the funds that you're invested in within the pension, the fund managers will probably have a cost for running those funds as well. Now, with auto-enrolment, there's a cap on what those total costs can be, which is 0.75%. That's for essentially the fund and the provider charges. Naturally, if a pension has a higher level of cost, it's going to limit the ability for the pension to grow as much as, say, a lower cost pension would. Now, that's quite a straightforward way of looking at it, but equally you could have a very sort of cheap fund that costs you very little but performs terribly, and you could have a high cost fund that performs really well, so it could balance it out. So cost will be a natural drag on the performance, but it's something certainly to consider when you're looking at the pension scheme that you've got.
Perfect. We spoke about employer contribution matching. So if we then look at increasing personal contributions, I think, again, the whole back remote enrolment is people aren't as maybe as educated as what they could be at an earlier age to really utilise this scheme kind of from the age of 22. I think even if you take me as an example, until I started working at True Potential, I had no idea how much I needed for retirement, and when I found out that figure, I was honestly quite shocked. So I think it really is kind of educating people and making sure that they're utilising kind of every penny they've got now for kind of their retirement. John, you mentioned before you would be devastated if you ended on a 20 grand pot for your retirement, and also people have worked all their lives to enjoy their retirement. So if we look at basically how we can utilise maybe maximising the employee contributions and things like that and upping them a little bit, what the benefits of that would be for clients. So you've then got potential like compounded growth in there if you're introducing a higher percentage earlier on. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, where people have got the capacity to put more in than the minimum, it can only be a good thing. You know, you can choose to spend your surplus money now on the things that you want to spend it on, or if you are in a position to do so, you can put a little bit more into the pension. As you've said, compound interest, you know, the earlier you put it in and the longer it's in the pension scheme for each year, you'll hopefully get some growth on the pension, and then that growth that you've achieved can be put towards, you know, growing further again in the future. And then as well as that, we've mentioned the tax benefits. You know, the more you put in, the more you're going to benefit from the tax relief that we talked about. So if you've got the capacity to do it, I know, you know, there's plenty of people whose finances will be stretched over the last couple of years, but where you've got the capacity to do it, it's a really important tool for retirement planning for sure.
Absolutely. And then we look at different types of auto-enrolment schemes. So you have a relief at source where you can claim tax back and it's based on qualified earnings. And one of the another common, I would say, type of policy is the salary sacrifice schemes. Fiona, how does that differ to your normal relief at source schemes?
So the salary sacrifice, it's where basically the full minimum 8% is contributed by the employer directly into the pension.
Yeah.
So it doesn't kind of come through the payroll, and it is it's quite self-explanatory, but you literally sacrifice some of your salary for that direct contribution into your pension. So like I say, there's nothing deducted from the payroll, but also it's beneficial if you're, for example, like a higher rate taxpayer. So you won't have to claim the tax relief from HMRC at that point, but also there'll be no sort of income tax or national insurance deductions on there as well. So and that full amount goes straight into that pension pot directly from the employer. So it's a really kind of good way. Like I say, it is slightly different, but it's a really good way to get that full kind of 8% in there and make the most of that employer contribution as well. And again, that's the minimum 8%. It can be an agreement between employees and employers of kind of what that percentage is, but again, you're looking at the minimum that 8%'s going in. Yeah.
I think that's the one caveat, isn't it, with regards to salary sacrifice. So if you as an employee were to be taken underneath national minimum wage, you can't then do a salary sacrifice scheme. You've got to make sure that you are above that. So that's just wanted to check and query if it is something that you're interested in looking into, just to make sure it doesn't take you below that threshold. Below that, yeah, absolutely. Looking at kind of adjusting things and changing things. So we've spoken a little bit about opting in, opting out, changing things throughout the time period of that workplace pension. Why would someone increase a pension? How can we do it? Sam, I'll direct this over to you. Have we got any tools within True Potential that we can utilise to make maybe like ad hoc payments into a workplace pension, anything like that?
Yeah, you've got our lovely Impulse Save feature that I know that our in-house development team are very, very proud of that one.
Yeah.
That means that you don't need to go and worry about changing your percentages or anything like that with your employer. You can just go straight onto your client site and go and make that ad hoc Impulse Save from literally, you can do it anywhere in the world at any time, day or night.
Perfect. And I think if you look at it like that, rather than actually going in and committing to change your percentage, it's maybe a little less pressure for those who are looking into that sort of thing. Because I think when people think, oh goodness, I've upped it from 5 to 7%, you then don't want to be a little bit less money the next month and think, oh, I need to reduce it again. So using the Impulse Save and really utilising that sort of thing can really make a huge difference. You can do it sort of at any point of the month, within the year. You can save your card details, can't you? And it's just like purchasing something on Amazon. It's really straightforward, and you can do that from as little as £1. So any spare money that you've got with things like that, you can really utilise and start building and tackling that savings gap. I think how a client then would know what is the best fund, what different types of funds. I'll direct this one over to you, please, John. So how to choose the fund based on the risk tolerance, kind of what is the best fund to be in. Can you give us a little bit of an overview on that one? I know it's quite a broad question.
No, that's all right. I think it's difficult. I think the regulator would come knocking at the door if I sat here and told you what the best fund to be in is. Absolutely. Because then you'd have an influx of people all trying to invest in it, and then it would inevitably go wrong. But I think everyone's circumstances are different. So Absolutely. You might have someone who's just been enrolled for the first time, they're 22 years old. Like I said earlier, you've got 40 plus years until you're due to retire. An individual like that might be in a position to take a slightly higher level of risk with their pension, because I know from my point of view, I'm putting money into my pension each month, but I'm not checking it every day to see what it's worth, because I can't get access to that for who knows how long. Whereas someone who's maybe 40, in their 50s, approaching retirement in their 60s, they're going to be a lot more focused on what that pot is worth, because they're going to need to use it in a few years' time. And it's natural when you start approaching retirement to want to maybe reduce your level of risk and to minimise those up and down fluctuations that you're inevitably going to see. I think risk tolerance for everyone is very personal.
Yeah.
You know, the level of risk that you feel comfortable with is going to be a decision for you to make with an auto-enrolment scheme. I think experience with an auto-enrolment pension helps. So if you've sat in it for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, you've seen that it's going to go up and down in value, particularly if you're tracking it on an app, such as the True Potential app. You see it go up and down every day, but after a while you realise that those day-to-day fluctuations, they're not actually affecting you.
Yeah.
So it might be that you start to feel a bit more comfortable with it and you start to look towards the higher level of risk. Generally speaking, you know, with higher risk comes potential higher reward. So if you are wanting to maximise growth and you're perhaps a little bit younger, then certainly higher risk might be the way you lean. Equally, the opposite's true. You know, lower risk funds might be, you know, fewer fluctuations or less substantial fluctuations, but less opportunity for long-term growth.
Absolutely. And if it is something that you are interested in looking into a little bit further, we do have an attitude of risk tolerance questionnaire available within the True Potential client site and app, which you can log on. It's a series of about 10 to 12 questions, and it gives you a good overview of where you would sit within the calculator. Keeping on topic of the app and the client site, how important is it to review your investment choices? So you've mentioned briefly there, John, about kind of people at different ages looking at it in different ways. So you've said yourself, like, you don't log in every day. Someone reaching retirement may log in every single day. How important is it, or is it really down to the client's preference?
Yeah, so I think it's always important to look at things certainly at least once a year. You want to make sure you've got an idea of where you're at, and I think a sort of yearly review, probably at the same time you get your annual statement, a reasonable place to start.
Yeah.
When I've spoken to, you know, customers and clients and individuals in the past, what I've always said is you don't want to be chopping and changing your investments, you know, on a day-to-day basis. We're not trying to sort of promote, you know, predicting what's going to happen tomorrow in the market. What you'll tend to find if you try to do that is, you know, there might be a period where the markets are a bit more negative and you think, oh, I don't like that, I'll go to a lower risk portfolio, and then, as is the natural course of things, the market might pick up.
Yeah.
You've missed out on potential growth and you think, oh, well, the market's nice again, I'll go back to high risk, and then it's just a sort of cycle from that. So you want to avoid doing that. So certainly once a year, no harm in looking at your risk profile and sitting down and thinking, well, you know, how am I feeling about risk? Do the attitude to risk questionnaire. Certainly as you approach retirement, you know, the reality starts to set in that you're going to need access to that money, and it can change your views on risk for sure. I think earlier on in your pension journey, you probably want to review things sort of regularly, but not changing too often if you can help it.
Perfect. What's the importance of adapting the strategy as you approach retirement? So again, looking at the different ends of the spectrum, kind of someone who's starting out at 22 and then moving up to retirement age, is it important for them to adapt their approach, or is it kind of steady along the way, or is it again personal preference?
Yeah, it's a very personal thing. I think certainly with a personal pension or an auto-enrolment pension, a lot of the time you might be using things like drawdown.
Yeah.
So you come to retirement, yes, you've got a pot of money, but that's not it. The pot of money can stay invested as you're drawing on it. So you don't want to reduce it down to nil. You don't want it just to be a static pot of money. You want it to still have the opportunity to grow while you're taking it out. So as you come up to retirement, it's not to say that you need to, you know, reduce your risk right down to zero.
Yeah.
You might just leave it at the sort of middle level of risk, and that'll be totally fine. But there is, I guess, a natural caution that people have when they come closer to retirement, that they want to protect rather than pursue growth.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I think that kind of covers all of the discussion points that we had today, but I would like to wrap up on giving a top tip to investors from yourselves, and I'll just kind of work the way down the line. So, John, if we start off with yourself, what would be your top tip to an auto-enrolment client?
For me, it would be sit down, look at your finances, work out what you're spending your money on, and have a look at what your pension's doing for you and what it's projected to do. So it's quite a long-winded top tip, but work out what's reasonable for you to afford, and where you can, try to put, more than the minimum into your pension, because it'll go a long way.
Perfect. Definitely not a snappy one.
No, not the headline.
Fiona, what about yourself?
For me is just, if you're auto-enrolled, stay enrolled. It's never too early to think about the future. The longer you've got into that pension, the more potential you've got for growth. So if you're in your first flushes of youth, don't think that it's too early.
Yeah.
It's not.
Perfect. Sam, what about yourself?
Knowing where your pension schemes actually are. I've got so many
That would be a good
friends,
start.
so many friends, and you know what? Even I was guilty of it until I actually joined TP, where I had about 5 or 6 different pensions with a couple of £100 in them.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can obviously transfer in, so you can consolidate all of them, or it's it can be beneficial to have them with different providers. But just knowing actually where they are in the first place, I think, is my top tip.
Absolutely. Well, on that, we do have a missing pension service here at True Potential. So if it is something that you're interested in, the details are all on the website, which you can go on and have a look, and the team can help and support you throughout that journey of finding those pensions, hopefully. Perfect. Well, thank you, all of you, for joining today, and all of the kind of discussion points and the tips that we've hopefully given all of the listeners today. If there are any further questions, to get in touch with us, you can speak to the team. All of the contact details are on the website, or you can speak to us through your app or client site. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.